Hello, this is Kent Morlan. I am here with my friend Ray Pearcey and Adam Martin for the Kent and Ray Show, the next version of it. Adam is a candidate for Congress this year, and he ran into Ray, and Ray suggested we get together and talk to Adam about his candidacy for the United States Congress and what he's learned from it. First of all, I understand, Adam, that you are you went to OSU, correct?
Yes.
And then after you got left at OSU, you came to Tulsa and you got involved in Democratic politics somehow or another. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, of course. So when I left Oklahoma State, I was going to go to law school, and so I got into a school out in California, but the pandemic had happened, and there was a lot of social justice issues going on with the George Floyd and all those things, and so around the country we're seeing looting and just all the craziest stuff, and so I wanted to get involved in that time because I wanted to make sure that people understood that the reason why people were so up in arms about what was going on, the injustices, right? And so I tell people this: when I got involved during that time, that doesn't make me radical or defunding the police type of thing. I got involved because I actually wanted to show unity in a moment that people had lost all hope in the system itself, right? And so when I came here to Tulsa, that's what we did. We got involved. I did a march on Greenwood, and then I got involved in the Democrat Party here, and we started registering people to vote. I mean, I just got really heavily involved, became a vice president of African American Federation, and like I said, I started meeting people, and here we are today. And so I guess we'll get into kind of why I decided to run.
Well, the next question.
Yeah.
Why did you decide
Exactly. So when
Tell people how old you are, man.
okay, well, when I announced to run, I was 25, and so today I am 27.
So, and you told me earlier in our first conversation that you basically basically been running for most of those 2 years.
I've been running for the last 2 years. Yeah, I was the first
So
candidate
it's
to
like a
announce my
two-year
candidacy.
odyssey. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. I was the first candidate in Oklahoma to announce my candidacy. But the reason I say that was for a reason, because I didn't have the name recognition. People didn't know who I was, and I was young. And then you're going up against a powerhouse on the federal level like this. And like I tell people all the time as a joke, I would never allow if I had kids to do what I've done because I would rather them, do the branches of government such as local level seat or something smaller, state house, then work your way up so you can get some name recognition. And me, I more or less just jumped into it because I couldn't fathom this guy going unopposed with all the work that he does not do for the district. And so I knew that my education had taught me all the things, somewhat of what government was and kind of how it's supposed to go. But also another thing that I tell people is what got me here is the issues we talk about, I actually lift them. Because if you understand my story at Oklahoma State, and backtracking, when I grew up in Wagner was humble beginnings. And so I grew up and seeing people on food stamp, on a fixed income, all the things that we talk about. And so when I went off to Oklahoma State, going into my second semester, I lived out of my car. And so when I tell people that story right there, that's not a sob story for me. That was my reality to really go forth with the American dream and seeing if it was plausible and really challenging myself, right? And so for me to be in this position was I saw that the guy wasn't working, Kevin Hearn. So I saw a need and I wanted to meet the need, right? And so that was more or less what was in my mindset when I actually did my studying because what people have to understand when you decide to run for such a seat, any seat, you should never just jump into it, right? Because that would be premature to just do that because you don't understand the dynamics of what it's going to take. And so for me, I started talking to people that have been there, that have done the work, and ultimately we had a big meeting. I'll never forget. I tell the story all the time. They bought me. It was on a Sunday, and it was like a table such as this. I was on one end, and it was all the different leaders that have ran, that have everything. And this is before we actually officially announced. And I sat there and they asked me every question you could think of to really get a feel for me. And all of them at that day, and they all agreed that they were going to support me because they said, you know what, we've had a lot of candidates come into this room and sit here and tell us what they're going to do. Young man, you didn't do that. You came here and actually listened. You were willing to allow us to share our experience and to invite us into the process of what your candidacy will look like for our district. And so for me to sit here, I tell people it's not my doing, it's the people that really believed in me, and I'm just a part of that. To really speak truth to power on what does it look like with policies and making sure that we actually present laws that work for people and speaking on the issues. And so I really felt like I could do this job effectively and actually show up and actually be willing to be put in the hot seat to get asked all the hard questions, because that's representation. I mean, on all levels.
Well, you know, I told you guys when we were in the blue room earlier that I really admire the two of you because unlike most Americans, you've made a supreme effort to sort of consummate your citizenship by running for public office, which most Americans never do. Most Americans, myself included, have thought about it from time to time and abandon it for one reason or another. But it takes courage and fortitude and the capacity to know that you're about to step into a meat grinder. You know?
My father was a sheriff in Cedar County, Missouri, and my brother was the mayor of El Dorado Springs, Missouri.
See, he comes from royalty. See,
Yeah,
he had
right.
elected officials in his
Right.
family.
Yeah.
And I ran and lost for District 4 City Council, but I got what I wanted out of the race because I wanted a particular ordinance repealed, and I got that done. So I achieved the result, and I didn't have to serve on the council with me. Serving on the council is a form of self-abuse, in my opinion.
Well, you know, one of the things that, you know, I think is important is taking yourself through this analytic process. You know, you're going to run for something, you got to make a choice on what it is. And I got a dissent from you a little bit, Adam, on the business of picking Congress rather than something else, because I would submit, and I think Kent would agree with me, that we're on the verge of one of the most dramatic, impactful mid-year contest in recent American history. And like you, I would have been outraged if a Republican incumbent during this time hadn't had some kind of opposition. And so I'm glad that you stepped up to the bar, and that was the office to do it with. And I will remind you, and Kent probably knows this, that Mike Sino, a former member of Congress from Oklahoma, when he was elected, he was only 28 for the first time.
Really? I did not know that.
You know, and Carl Albert, who represented Little Dixie in Oklahoma in Congress for many years and became Speaker of the House, I don't think he was much older when he finally when he gained office for the first time.
Well, he would have served for 50 years or so in Congress, and by the time he
retired
finally.
That's right. You know, and at one point he was in the succession line as Speaker of the House. So Oklahoma has a history, and I think Howard Edmondson, governor in the 60s here, he was only in his early 30s when he became governor, and David Gord, another example, I think he was 33 or 34 when he was elected governor of Oklahoma for the first time. So, you know, younger, and I think there are a score of people your age who secured nomination and who are in a position to prevail in this contest. There's a guy from New Jersey. He's 20. He will be 25 if he wins, and he looks likely to win. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned. You know, I want to remind our viewers that we're talking about the 1st Congressional District, an area that encompasses Tulsa and the surrounding area in northeastern Oklahoma. And Adam here is the Democratic nominee for that post. He's going to be opposing Mr. Kevin Hearn, who's the incumbent, and who
Well, the population of District 1's about 60-40 Republican, isn't it?
What are the numbers? Have you seen those numbers
It's
lately?
about this. It's about that, but it's a little different now with the redistricting because they took out Bartlesville and they took out Wagner, so that number actually comes down a little bit and actually gives independents a little bit more, voting power. Gives a little bit of libertarians, right? And so it gives it more of a shot to actually be done. Actually,
But it's
yeah, the
still
numbers.
it's still in the 50s. The Republicans share,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. And it is Bartlesville. Taking Bartlesville out is a big thing.
It was definitely a big thing, and I tell people, the media, no one covers the fact that with the redistricting, actually gave us a shot
Right,
to
right.
win this seat because with them doing that. I don't know what they really were thinking about. Obviously, we know what redistricting is all about. We know about the gerrymandering of lines. We understand the whole process of why it's being done, right? And it actually gives us a fair chance to fight for real people again and to give them a shot. We just got to get people to show up and vote. Because I tell people, Oklahoma is not just it's considered a red state, right? But we're actually more of a purple state, but we're not more of any of those things, and we're just not a non-voting. We got to get out and vote. People aren't showing up. The moment it's never been right to show up and vote, right?
Ray's disappeared off the screen.
Oh, well, it wouldn't be the
You need
first
to
time
move to
it's
the right,
happened.
Ray.
Moving to the right is encouraging me.
That's
That
right.
Well, I don't know
Okay, but
about
I mean, you were saying Kevin Ahern hasn't done anything. Of course, he's been in the minority for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and he's a freshman member of Congress. I mean, it's rare that anybody like that does anything of any consequence. But my comment went to the fact that, I consume a lot of political information, as you do. And I can't remember a time when a congressional incumbent has been less visible. I can't remember a time when, as someone who wrote a lot and did a lot of political stuff, I didn't run into this guy at random in the course of attending parades and art galleries and festivals and other events that one does in the course of daily life in a major American city, where you often run into political figures. So that's what I meant, and you kind of intimated that you thought that was part of his strategy to be very low profile.
Well, I tell people out of sight, out of mind, and I say I think that's really what his strategy is. He stays out the way because if you stay out the way and you do, what he's doing, it literally, I think it's more or less a concept of his that it puts on the public and people that don't keep up with the political stuff. That especially for those that vote straight party line on both sides, right? That makes them understand that well, maybe he's not doing such a bad job because no one's talking about him. Maybe he's not
scandals.
But the thing is, he votes against our well-beings of what we need, right? He voted against our veterans, right? The Burn Act. He took away. He voted against the Ukrainian aid, which I understand on both sides. On one side they say, well, why are we sending so much aid and to a country where we need help our own selves? So I understand both sides of the argument. And out on the campaign trail, I've heard those arguments, but people are like, how could he, of all people, vote against that whenever his own leadership, McCarthy, of all people, voted with it? I mean, that doesn't it doesn't get any more Republican than that. McCarthy voted with it, but Kevin Ahern voted with the guy, what's his name in Florida, the guy that was accused of rapist, Matt Gaetz, right?
Yeah,
Matt Gaetz, right? I mean, it just shows the times we're in where he's really out of touch with what our values are in Oklahoma.
Well, I wonder if the Ukrainian aid vote was one of the first times he didn't vote with the caucus and with the leadership, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing to me about that is that to say that saying we're going to give Ukraine $400 million in aid, we don't give them $400 million in aid. We give them $400 million worth of
credits.
military equipment that has been manufactured by companies in the United States.
Exactly. And another thing I want people to understand, because this stuff is federal, and you got to know what you're talking about when you talk about this, right? We send that money over there, we're building our NATO alliance at the same time. So I try to get people to understand that there's a reason why the United States is so invested in helping our Ukrainian brothers and sisters with their fight for peace, right, on their land, and so in their country. And so I want people to understand that there's a reason behind these things. It's not that we're just throwing in, the American people's dollars away and all the things, because the thing is, if for Kevin Hernan, I try not to attack him too much, because like I said, he makes my job easier, because he doesn't do anything for our district. And I know it's funny, but he doesn't do anything. And so what I tell people is, we need someone that actually shows up, is actually wanting to do the job, because this job, you got to work for Republican, independents, libertarians, Democrat. You have to vote and work for those people, but you have to be willing to sit in the seat and get grilled and get those hard questions, because that is very important for leadership and for people to actually have that trust in you and in the process, because right now people have lost hope in our democratic process, in the democracy as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
People have lost hope in that, whether you call it republic or democracy. People are losing hope with the way things are going. And so we need leadership that actually shows up and actually wants to do the work. But what does that plan look like, right? I hear a lot of people talking about, on Republican side, they talk about building a wall. Well, I tell people the wall is not really affecting everyday Oklahomans as much as the media may push it that it may be, but it's not, right? We don't live in Texas. We don't live in California. We aren't talking about the real issues in Oklahoma that really need to be talked about, especially when it comes to kitchen table conversations.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about inflation right now, people on a fixed income struggling, right? Struggling to put gas in their car. These are conversations that I'm having out on the campaign trail that are really effective, right? Because we're never going to agree on critical race theory. We're never going to agree on women's rights on either side, right? But what we can agree on is we're struggling. We can agree on that we are in a position right now that we do not like, we're very uncomfortable, and we need a leader that stands up for our rights, stands up to protect the rights of all men and women's kind, because that's what it calls for in this moment, to show unity, right? We can't have a leader that just straight party and doesn't work for everyday people that may not vote with Republican or vote with Democrat or Independent, whatever. We need a leader that is, yeah, I have a D behind my name. I tell people that. I have a D behind my name, I understand. But I work for you. So whatever problems you're dealing with, I want to be able to have a conversation with you. Kendra Horn, I'll say this real quick. When she was elected here in Oklahoma, no one thought that could happen. It was such a long shot.
Ms. Horn represented a district in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, exactly,
was a
District 5.
Democrat, right.
District 5. And so, obviously Stephanie Weiss ended up, winning over her in her re-election process. But what I'll say is she earned her award for being the most accessible congresswoman during her time, right? And so that is a very much award that I would like to have, because I'm very accessible to people. I never shy away from meetings like this where they have a platform or whether they don't, because I'm not in it for self-gain. I'm in it for people, to build up other people, whether that's businesses, whether that's their everyday lives in general. Because I tell people this too, is if we're going to build an economy that works for everybody, we have to fix our education system. We have to invest in our education system, because we have a guy named Ryan Walters that's running for state superintendent that is talking about doing away with the federal dollars because they're being spent on left-wing agendas. And I tell people, it's a tragedy that's what he's talking about, because it's not true. I have many Oklahomans benefited from those federal dollars when I was in school, right? I got the free and reduced lunches. I got the after-school program. I got the tutoring, right? Those federal dollars, they contribute to so many things that I couldn't even imagine having my mom and them having to, fork out of their own pocket to pay for those things, right? And so for someone to just, it's all scare tactic, right?
Well, sure, and it's a denial of American economic history.
Yeah.
Kent and I have talked about this. The land grant,
Yeah.
colleges from Lincoln's days, starting with that, and all of the investments, again, Lincoln and before Lincoln, and trailways and water routes for commerce that were financed using federal resources. I mean, the entire history of this country is tightly connected to federal investments that have been transformative. I didn't, I haven't focused much on that superintendent. That's the post, isn't it? Superintendent of public schools. Haven't focused much, except that I know there's a crazy person running for the office, and it's a repeat of Mary Fallon's position on the Affordable Care Act. We don't want those federal health care dollars enslaving Oklahomans. It's not like we don't get and accept Social Security.
Well, what is Hearn for? What are some of his positions that he's taking? Did he vote for the Build Back Better bill?
No.
Probably not.
He calls it the Build Back Broke plan. That's what he calls it.
So what is it that he would vote for? Let's say he ends up in the majority and you're not there.
Yeah.
What is it exactly that the Republicans are going to do over the next 2 years? Investigate Biden, impeach Biden?
It's going to be a whole other thing of what they argue with the Democrats. And so that's why I tell people, I'm a Democrat, but I'm also, I think for myself. I work for my people, right? For the people of District 1. And so we need a leader that actually doesn't get in there and plays politics, but actually does the work of the people. Because when they don't have any bipartisanship on the federal level and Senate, for we can get those bills to the president's desk to sign them into law, when we don't get these bills done, the American people are at the front forth of that tragedy, because we didn't get anything done on their behalf. And so now they're sitting back losing hope in our process, wondering, why do we go and vote? Why do we even take part in this process when every year something new is coming up? And
well, what's Hearn's position on Social Security, for example?
Oh, he hasn't spoken on it, and that's the sad thing about Social Security. That Social Security is what 800,000 Oklahomans, right, are benefiting from right now, that work their tails off for that service, and for that to be up on the table in here in November 8th, for them to try to privatize it and all the things that they're trying to do. It's a tragedy.
Well, what about the Affordable Care Act?
I don't
got a position on the Affordable Care Act?
I have not heard his take on that. Like I said,
what is he for? What is he for?
It's really hard to say. I mean, he's really more
okay.
He's
so what are you for?
Exactly. I'm about representing our everyday Americans. Like when we talk about those federal dollars, making sure that they get back to our schools, because that's a topic of discussion right now. So I want people to understand that I will actually work towards protecting those federal dollars. When you talk about our healthcare system, making sure that it's equitable for everyone American, especially in our state, to make it and not privatizing healthcare and giving leeway to negotiate drug prices, right, for the medicine, so we can lessen the expense on the people, right? So I stand for making sure that when we talk about infrastructure, right, they vote, Kevin Hearn voted against infrastructure. We drive on these highways all the time, and these bad roads that we complain about, and the very person that voted against it is Kevin Hearn, and we definitely needed that here in Oklahoma. But now that it's kind of it's going good in a way, and those dollars are being allocated in different ways to build up our district, now they're all coming out the closet saying that they're all for infrastructure when they all voted against it, especially him.
Well, remember Infrastructure Week during the Trump administration? It was like every other week was infrastructure. It never happened. And you're right, Biden and the Democrats have enacted the largest capital improvement program at the national scale in a generation.
Yeah, and I try to tell people this too. Democrats, we have our flaws too, right? We all got our flaws on both sides, whatever you want to call yourself. But the thing is, we need leadership that actually understands that and is willing to admit, when we're wrong. I'm not going to get everything right. I can't sit and go into any room and act like I have it all together. I know everything, because I'm still learning. I'm still learning from the people that have done it before me on how this stuff works, and how can I build a legacy of working across the aisle. Because when I win this seat in November 8th, next Tuesday, I want to be able to have bipartisanship on day one, to be able to work with my Republican colleagues, or be able to work with the people across the aisle, because I know that's how you get things done. But nowadays we got politicians that are sent to Washington, that are sitting on their tail, more or less is what I call it, and whenever there's a bill that works, Well, as a Democrat that proposed the bill, so now we're not going to vote on the bill because a Democrat, we're going to find all the things that's wrong with it, even though we know it could either benefit their constituents, build a better economy for their district, right? And so it's a tragedy that that's where we're at right now. And so we need leadership that whether a Democrat proposes the bill or a Republican proposes the bill, if it works for our districts, if it benefits our country, we need to make sure that we're in no means stopping that from going through. Because like I said in the beginning, the American people are the ones that are affected when we don't do anything or get anything done.
Okay, Biden has come out in favor of decriminalizing marijuana. What's your position on that?
I do believe that because right now we got a lot of people making money off of the industry. Whenever it was very much criminalized, and we look, and as a historian, we go. I mean, I can take you back to the 80s, the 70s, right? I mean, how it was just the war on drugs, right? I mean, just say no with the Reagan administration, Nancy Reagan, right? And so I understand the whole concept of it when you look at the 3 strikes you're outlaw in California, right, under Clinton, right? So I understand all arguments of that, and so I support decriminalizing of marijuana, and especially for low offenses, so we can get them back in to be productive citizens of our society. Another thing I do want to share is the fact that no one's talking about this, and I think it's a tragedy that we aren't at least talking about it, so voters can think about this on the voting trail as they go to vote, either early voting today or voting in the general November 8th, is that we criminalize our people, not just blacks, whites, whatever. We criminalize these defendants, and they don't get to come out, they don't get to vote, they don't get to take part in our voting process, right? And here's a man named Donald Trump who, if indicted, can still have a possibility under our law to run for, even if he sits in a cell, can still run for president. It blows your mind. It doesn't make sense how that could even play effect and how that even works, right? So you're saying this guy, that even if he gets indicted and actually goes and sits in a jail, he can still run for president. It's a tragedy.
Well, there are tens of thousands of minor level drug offenders, marijuana offenses in the main, who can't vote, have to check the box when they go in for a job, have trouble finding apartments, because again they have to check the box.
Well, of course, Trump couldn't vote in Florida if he's a convicted felon, could he? Unless he completely discharges. He couldn't even vote for himself if he's been convicted.
Well, Florida passed a big piece via referenda, a big piece of legislation that repatriated people who were guilty of felonies and had served their time.
There's all kinds of conditions on that.
That's right.
It
You
was
have
sort
to
of
pay.
It was illusory.
Well, it was a pretty clean thing until DeSantis and the Republican legislature said, well, yeah, this thing passed, but you have to pay all of your back fees and have to reimburse the people that you offended against, and this, that, and one thing and the other, and for many people it made it impossible.
Well, there were 2 people that I understand have been indicted down there who were issued voter registration cards for the state of Florida.
That's right.
And then they prosecuted them for voting or attempting to vote.
Yeah, he's created an election policing service. And 20 people have been arrested, and most of them have a voting card issued by the state board of elections.
So why don't we have leadership standing up, whether that's in Florida? I don't keep up with Florida politics, but those 2 incidents have been very much publicized in the news and everything. And so I say this: why aren't we having leadership that stands up? And I hear some people talking about it now, but why aren't we talking about the fact that how did we even allow a process to even give those guys their voter registration cards in the first place, right? Is there not a system in place? Can we not create a system that catches those type of instances that they're not supposed to have the right to vote, right? Because at the end of the day, I feel like that part is left on us, because they thought they'd done their time. Someone probably told them, well, you've done your time, you can go and register to vote. Same thing that we hear all the time on the voting trail when someone says, oh, they've done their time. We say, well, you can still register to vote now. You can vote. You can take part in our process, our democracy. What I'm trying to get to, very simple. We need to get to a place where legislators stand up and admit when we're wrong, that we should have something in place, whether that's federal, state, in place to catch those type of instances, so we aren't re-criminalizing these folks after they've already done their time. Because what a inconvenience that was. And I saw the videos of those guys in Florida being taken in handcuffs, very confused, arguing, talking about, why, what, I've already done my time, and we are. And then another notion I'll take is they were black and brown folks, right? And I know there were some, Caucasians that were arrested too, from what I've understood. But the majority of them was, black and brown folks. And so it's a tragedy that we're re-sentencing these people. And then at the same time, what we're getting to whenever DeSantis does something like that, it is setting precedent without people understanding the fact that you're recriminalizing one, but you're also having a lot of people that don't want to take part in the process at that point, because now they're like, I don't even want to be arrested because I don't even know if I don't know who to ask, if I even qualify to run it.
Well, it's intimidating.
Exactly. And so those tactics are being set on the American people, and it's a tragedy, because we need leadership that stands up and admits when they're wrong. DeSantis should, and of all people, should admit we need to have a task force in place. A real leader would have done it like this. They don't want everybody to vote. That's not a secret. We've been knowing that from the 60s. We've been knowing that. There's always been this take on, we don't want everyone to vote. So how can we, lessen that value of people even wanting to vote? So then you take away, you put them in low economic housing, and then you take away their rights. You criminalize them for low minor offenses, right? And then the list goes on and goes on. And so then these people, these communities are devastated like no other. And we wonder now, in our days, as a historian, we all ask the question, why aren't people taking part in this, mundane, very equitable, very successful process of just voting in general? Because these families have been devastated. A lot of people, they don't understand the history of our ancestors that fought to be a part of this process. It's very very sensible process that it gives people the right to pick who they want their leadership to be. But then it goes back to this. I'm jumping to a lot of hoops right now, but then it also gets back into gerrymandering of districts. Now you got people representing districts that don't even understand that district, right? That don't even, never even been over in that area, right? And so now you having people being represented by a representative, state house, whatever, local, that person's never even been in their district, never been in their community. And so now they're left with very low representation, and they don't want to take part in the process, is what I'm getting to. And it's a tragedy. We have to speak truth to these things because they're important. And I tell people this too, real quick. It's not radical, what I'm talking about. It's just speaking truth, that this is where we are and this is where we need to be, right? Because as a historian, we understand that if we don't respect history and understand history, right, and learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it, right? We're in a position right now on November 8th, this Tuesday, that we can change this stuff for the good of all people. I tell people this too. I may not get over the mark, right? But someone in Oklahoma is going to get over that mark because we've done our part. Because we got out and voted. We got and put the yard signs in our yard. We got out and got people registered. We got out and we made sure people felt heard again and had hope in our system, and showed them that this is what I'm about. This is what I want to do, and this is what we can be.
By the way, it's my estimate that to run for re-election, someone like Kern has to have about $2 to $2.5 million to spend on his campaign. What are the financial numbers associated with this election for District 1?
Exactly. He's not spending no money in this district. He's not even spending a lot of time in our district. I mean, I've been at 2 events so far not with him, but like he's been at them where I've seen him.
You challenged him to a debate.
I've challenged him to a debate. I've emailed him, and then one of his office members here in Tulsa emailed back and said, well, this is the wrong email, but I'll get it back. I'll get the message relayed, but nothing came about it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've seen him in the Glenpool event. He showed up there. He wasn't even there. And I wish people could really see this stuff, because then he gets online and posts it as if he was there all day. I'm the one that's been sitting there all day meeting people. I got there when he was there. Literally, he was there for about 10, 20 minutes, who knows, and literally took a picture with the people or whatever that came by there, and then he left. right? Because they knew I was down down at my booth. You know what I mean? And he's shaping this notion that he's in the community. He's not, right? And then I was at the Bixby Jinx football game this Friday, and he was on both. Like he had the superintendent of Bixby walking from their sideline over to. I was sitting right there on the fence, right there on the field, watching all this stuff take place. And my group that was with me were like, "This is crazy! Like this he's literally at a kids football game trying to get noticed, so people can say like, oh, Kevin Hearn, I saw him or whatever." And that's what I'm trying to bring to the table right now. The guy's not in our community. He's not showing up. He doesn't want to do the work. And this job requires that you show up, you listen to people's needs, because if you see a need, you have to want to meet the need in some capacity, whether that's representation or figuring out a resource, right?
Well, some of it is arrogance. I mean, there hasn't been a Democrat in the first congressional seat since the 70s. Jim Jones, who earlier had been a senior staffer in Lyndon Johnson's White House, ran for that post, held it for a while, later became chair of the American Stock Exchange, and wasn't he ambassador to Mexico for a while?
Seems like that's true.
I think that was true. Yeah.
So he was, and that was, when he was elected, it was the early 70s, and I think he stayed in office for 2 or 3 terms. So Hearn and others who've held the seat, all Republicans, they're...
Yeah.
Tulsa has been a Republican city even back when Oklahoma was a Democrat state.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the Southern strategy has effectively switched Oklahoma from a Democrat state to a Republican state, which is another issue, of course, entirely as to how the Republicans have managed to capture the American South through their Southern strategy, which is basically racist, misogynist, nativist, all of the things you could talk about that are generally undesirable but appeal to a certain segment of the population, right?
Yeah, and it's sad, and it's interesting because the state is schizophrenic in the sense that on almost every opportunity where there's a referenda campaign, that on its face is a repudiation of, quote, Oklahoma values, like prohibition, the marijuana medical use referenda, the Obamacare or the Affordable Care Extension or Participation Measure, which was passed by referenda. Every time the people of Oklahoma get to vote on one of these big measures that ostensibly Oklahomans probably wouldn't value, they vote yes. It's very strange.
It's very strange.
But what you say about the Southern strategy is certainly true, Kent. It's like, I think the last time Oklahoma voted for a Democratic presidential candidate was 64. I think Oklahoma voted for Johnson in that contest.
Probably.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we
That
definitely...
was the last time.
Yeah. And so like I tell people, he votes against, everything that is more or less more progressive to get us moving forward. And so, but when it comes to the PPP money, which everyone talks about a lot, him and Mullins were first in line for their businesses. Then they actually
he received a PPP.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And that's
he owns a set of restaurant.
He owns McDonald's franchises, but from what I found out, he's sold them, but he hasn't really sold them. They are more or less in someone else's name or something of that nature.
Held in trust.
Yeah, and it's something like that. And so people in the public are thinking like, oh, he sold them. But what I found out, that he actually didn't sell them. They're just in another or whatever. And so in 2018, he was, projected to be worth $60 million. He's one of the very wealthiest members of Congress. And so that's why he's taken this whole, if you've seen his last TV ad that he just put out 2 weeks ago, that he's saying in the video, and it's only like 40 seconds, 30 seconds, I don't know. But he's saying, oh, no budget, no pay. So if we don't, pay attention to the budget or get something passed on it or whatever, focus on protecting the budget, then Congress members shouldn't get pay. And I think people should understand that's so bullcrap, because even your Republican colleagues that don't make us enough money or have the resources you have are not going to vote with that because they want to receive their check at the end of the day. It's all about, you want to make your pay for your work. So for him to be one of the ones that's he's saying that once he wins this election, he's going to propose that in January legislation on no budget, no pay. Do you really think that's going to pass? And I can't even believe that whoever his comms person is that's working with his campaign would allow him to put that out there. But I understand what he's doing. He's basically shaping to the Oklahomans in District 1 that, hey, I believe that, for term limits. Well, actually, I found, and this is a whole nother deal, even though he signed the term limit pledge, someone basically with that knows very close to him that conversated with this, shared this with me, that even though he signed the term limit pledge, his is shaped in a way that he actually doesn't have. He's going to be there for a long time. He's not going to do the Mullins thing where he, serve 2 terms or 3, whatever, and be done. His term pledge is actually set up different. I wish people could understand that. That's bullcrap. How do you set your term limit pledge up? So they're going around telling people for term limits, but they're not telling us how long or what does that look like.
Well, he and Tom Cole and others, other Republicans have signed that pledge, and then.
But Tom Cole abided by that.
Well, he abided by it in terms of his membership in the House, but then he ran for the Senate. So to me, that
Gotcha.
what's that about?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So.
And like I said, he votes against that, and like I said, he took the PPP money, but then he voted against Biden's plan on forgiving student loan forgiveness, right?
That's right, and he got a lot more through that PPP process.
Yeah, and so I tell people, he's became more of a banker than a representative because he doesn't focus on us. Like there's a person on, and this is for the younger community that are listening to this, that will listen to this. There's a guy on TikTok that posts every time Kevin Hearn or other people, members of Congress, put their money into stocks and things of that nature. And Kevin Hearn has consistently disobeyed and went against the Knowledge Act of 2012. That was put in place basically of insider trading.
And insider
trading. But I'll tell you this though, both sides could be to blame on that too, because in 2020 when the pandemic, both sides were pulling out the market because they knew something we didn't know, right? And so that I have to say that I tell people because I'm very transparent. On the process of, we got to have leaders that actually want to work for people, but we got to have leaders that vote for our interests and what benefits us. And he only votes with bills that really benefit these companies and corporations because a lot of those guys, it's all public knowledge, he's very stacked up in PAC money. McDonald's just came out and gave him another big lump sum of money with their PAC funds, and so and it was in the newspaper that he still wanted to McDonald's favorites or something like that in Congress, and so he's more beneficial with One Oak and all these other companies that are giving him money that he's not able to work for us at this point. And I understand I tell people I'm okay with the 1% making money. I'm okay with very much protecting the middle class, but we also got to give the less fortunate chance at the American dream, right?
Right. Okay, but Saturday, I'm actually going to vote this afternoon, I think. A lot of people are already starting to vote, absentee and early vote.
Are the polls open on Saturday? I didn't realize.
Oh yeah, they're until 2.
Open,
2 o'clock today.
Go to the election
until
board?
2.
2 o'clock today.
Well, that was the plan, to go vote today as opposed to Tuesday. So a lot of people, the votes are already being cast. So assuming anybody sees this and we get it put on YouTube, what would you have to say to people today if they haven't voted and they haven't made up their mind? What would you say to them about why they should give consideration to voting for you?
Exactly. So I would tell you guys to vote for your conscience, because if you look at what's happened in the last 2 years under Kevin Hearn's administration, he has not worked for the will of the people. He has forgotten the values that we all share in Oklahoma, that we are our brother's keeper, that we will be responsible for the very well-being of our children, for our state, and for the progress that we need on day one. And so he has not spoken for us. He has not shown up in our communities to hear our needs, right? To meet a need, to see a need, right? And so I tell people to, I would love to earn your support, because I have continued to show up. I have continued to go into rooms and have tough conversations, even if they are Republican, to have those conversations to see how can we actually sit down and present a plan. on what this stuff looks like, because Kevin Hearn is more or less presenting a plan that's the MAGA Trump plan, and that's not what our plans need to be. We need a plan that benefits District 1. I am very much honored and thankful for the opportunity to run for you guys, and I hope you guys will definitely consider voting for me on November 8th, because you know what? We need leadership that actually shows up. We need leadership that actually wants to do the work, and I'm very much embedded in wanting to do the work. I don't take any PAC money. If you follow me, you know that I posted that we received 2 PAC checks from Washington, D.C., and I disregarded those checks, and I made it very public that that happened, and that was because I want to make sure that I can't be bought, that I work for the American people. I work for Oklahomans, because we need leadership that works for people again, to present hope in a time where people have lost all faith. We need to make sure that we're presenting a plan that represents this district, and what does that look like moving forward. We're talking about issues that really don't pertain to Oklahomans, because Oklahomans are struggling and wanting to make sure that they can still put food on the table. And so I humbly ask for your vote November 8th, and whether you're early voting or November 8th on Tuesday, I humbly ask for your vote. And if you guys would like to show up to our election watch party, it'll be at Agoria Event Center at 7 o'clock in the evening on November 8th. And so I encourage you guys to show up, and I'm willing to listen to you guys. And everybody that knows this, we also are going to be posting a story later on of how I was able to help a man get his Social Security, and I'm not even in office yet. And so it's a story that I think
constituent services going before you're in
exactly.
office,
And so that story will be presented
what
to people.
about a website?
If you go to martinforcongress.com, we would love your support. We're still raising money even after November 8th, because like I said, we got to pay our stuff, like bills and things that we've done to really make this thing go. And so we got staff and all the things that we've done. And so we're a grassroots campaign, and I am truly honored again that I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of you folks and to share this space with you, because we have more in common than what's been presented to us. And so we need a leader that presents a real plan, and what does that plan look like, because we aren't getting it right now. And that's not a radical idea, it's common sense.
Okay. Adam Martin, District 1, Congress, Oklahoma. He's asking for your vote.
He's a pro-choice guy. He's a former football player, but you know what? He is no Herschel Walker.
Well, that says it doesn't. Thank you for your time, folks. This has been the Kent and Ray Show.
Good job, man.